Some crucial updates for you on a few different things. And what I want to get to, most importantly, is a little bit of a warning that was crafted and issued about the potential for Trump to induce a total collapse economically, socially, maybe public health wise, given that the acts that right now seem so chaotic and aggressive, and MAGA's having so much fun with them, it actually could be, I've used this reference before, but like Jenga. Oh, you're pulling out the little blocks. Yeah, we're having a fun time. And then boom. And that's what I want to outline in a second here. But first, let's watch Trump on Air Force One, a quick impromptu presser that he held, starting with this. If you appreciate the show, please do click the subscribe button if you haven't yet.
Planning to make cuts too.
Well, I think we're going to take in tremendous tariff money, number one. And number two, you take a look at Doge and you see what's happening. We're saving billions of dollars.
On Doge, do you know what they're looking at specifically at the Department of Defense right now?
Yeah, they're looking at everything.
And are they going to cut more national
They're looking at. We're going to
security
go into Fort Knox to make sure the gold is there.
Are they going to?
You know that we're going to go into Fort Knox. Do you know about that?
Sir,
That was a bad bump.
are they going to eliminate more national security positions, civilians there?
We'll see what happens. But one of the things we do want to look, I mean, we hope everything's fine with Fort Knox, but we're going to go to Fort Knox, the fabled Fort Knox, to make sure the gold is there.
Where would the gold have gone?
If the gold isn't there, we're going to be very upset.
Yeah, so to anyone who's concerned with egg prices, as they emphasized a lot until Trump actually got in power, and the record high egg prices, or if you're concerned with the affordability of housing, or if you're concerned with anything else, no need to fear. Trump's checking Fort Knox. All right. Why Trump came out for this was to brag about how well he did in the election. Look at how red this map is.
Hello. Hello, everybody. So you just saw this. This just came out. And I'd say that's quite good, right? By any standard, that's quite good. I shouldn't leave USA. Is anybody here from USA today? Yesterday. We missed him. Does everybody know Stephen Chung? He's a sweetheart. You wouldn't want to get in a fight with him, right? Anyway, what's up?
Mr. President, the TikTok deal, any developments there?
No, there's a lot of people interested in TikTok, and I think we have a chance of doing something good.
All right, so no updates on TikTok, but what was that for? Look, I won a lot of states. Yeah, we know. And then this.
We'll do a couple more.
Sir, do you think you can still pay for extending your tax cuts without cutting both Medicaid and Medicare?
Yeah, absolutely.
House Republicans are planning to make cuts too.
Well, I think we're going to take in tremendous tariff money, number one. And number two, you take a look at Doge and you see what's happening. We're saving billions of dollars.
All right, so because I want to get to this new outline of where things could cause a collapse, a global collapse, as it's described by Guardian author George Monbiot, let me circle back to Trump fakely, inaccurately claiming that to pay for his tax cut bill, we wouldn't have to go and cut certain mandatory spending programs. And that's just not true. And it's something Republicans have already admitted they're going after. And so I'll remind you of that. But we've done that a lot. What we haven't talked about is this. The Guardian reports there are many ways Trump could trigger a global collapse. Here's how to survive. Yikes. If that happens, again, you see there George Monbiot. And if we go forward, he writes, though we might find it hard to imagine, we cannot now rule it out. The possibility of systemic collapse in the United States. The degradation of federal government by Donald Trump and Elon Musk could trigger a series of converging, compounding crises leading to social, financial, and industrial failure. This is not about preemptively panicking. It's not about oversounding the alarms, but at least as a thought experiment and a preparation action, making sure that we're thinking about in what areas could we see real negative impacts and potentially compounding negative impacts because of the actions taken by the Trump administration. There are several possible mechanisms, George writes. Let's start with an obvious one. Their assault on financial regulation. Trump's appointee to the U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Russell Vought, has suspended all the agency's activity, slashed its budget, and could be pursuing Musk's ambition to, quote unquote, delete the Bureau. The CFPB was established by Congress after the 2008 financial crisis to protect people from the predatory activity that helped trigger the crash. The signal to the financial sector could not be clearer. Fill your boots, boys. A financial crisis in the U.S. would immediately become a global crisis. So that's the first possibility. You start gutting or deleting, as Musk has said, the very agency that's supposed to prevent us from the type of economic crisis we saw in 2008. You could imagine such a thing happening. But the hazards extend much further. Musk calling for a wholesale removal of regulations sends his child soldiers to attack government departments, stabilizing the entire U.S. system. Regulations, though endlessly maligned by corporate and oligarchic propaganda, are all that protect us from multiple disasters. In its initial impacts, deregulation is class war, hitting the poorest and the middle classes at the behest of the rich. As the effects proliferate, it becomes an assault on everyone's well-being. Before going to more examples, it's not that there aren't some regulations that are needless. You could find a regulation and say, hey, that's not really protecting people and it's wasting time, it's wasting paperwork, effort, whatever. But the broader, let's deregulate everything, and Trump saying, almost for the sake of it, he wants to see how many regulations he can roll back. Well, often, like capping junk fees or capping overdraft fees, randomly rolling back regulations just means you're taking away some of the not enough protections that your everyday consumers have. To give a couple of examples, the fires in Los Angeles this year are expected to cost, on various estimates, between $28 billion and $75 billion in insured losses alone. Estimates of total losses range from $160 billion to $275 billion. These immense costs are likely to be dwarfed by future climate disasters. As Trump rips down environmental protections and trashes federal responsiveness, the impacts will spiral. They could include non-linear shocks to either the insurance sector or homeowners, escalating into U.S.-wide economic and social crisis. So just some really fun things here. Going further, if or when another pandemic strikes, as we're seeing pandemic response efforts again being defunded and destaffed, which could involve a pathogen more transmissible and even more deadly than COVID-19, which has so far killed 1.2 million people in the US, it will hit a nation whose defenses have been stood down. Basic public health measures such as vaccination and quarantine might be inaccessible to most or discouraged by the Trump administration. A pandemic in these circumstances could end millions of lives and cause spontaneous economic shutdown. We saw on one of the potential public health crises that previously the administration was wanting to make sure we're thoroughly researching and releasing that information publicly and preparing for a response. And we saw that the Trump administration shut down a lot of those efforts and a lot of the transparency in those efforts. A little bit more. Because there's little public understanding of how complex systems operate, collapse tends to take almost everyone by surprise. Complex systems such as economies and human societies have characteristics that make them either resilient or fragile. A system that loses its diversity, redundancy, modularity, the degree of compartmentalization, its circuit breakers such as government regulations and backup strategies, alternative means of achieving a goal, is less resilient than one which retains these features. So is a system whose processes become synchronized. In a fragile system, shocks can amplify more rapidly and become more transmissible. A disruption in one place proliferates into disaster everywhere. This, as Andy Haldane, a former chief economist at the Bank of England, has definitely explained, is what happened to the financial system in 2008. So are we willingly charging toward such a scenario by gutting many of the very institutions and rolling back many of the very regulations that prevent such crises, such collapses from happening in the first place? Paradoxically, with his trade wars and assault on global standards, Trump could help to desynchronize the system and reintroduce some modularity. But as he simultaneously rips down circuit breakers, undermines preparedness, and treats Earth systems as an enemy to be crushed, the net effect is likely to make human systems more prone to collapse. At least in the short term, the far right tends to benefit from chaos and disruption. This is another of the feedback loops that can turn a crisis into a catastrophe. Trump presents himself as the hero who will save the nation from the ruptures he has caused while deflecting the blame onto scapegoats. Yes, we also and urgently need national and global action brokered by government, but it's beginning to look as if no one has our backs. Prepare for the worst, George says. He did. There's more in this article if you want to go find it. Some hopeful things, but there is a pretty bleak picture. The point is something we've been saying. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm not saying all crises on all fronts is definitely going to take place, economic collapse, but it stands to reason that we should at least intellectually prepare for, think out the scenarios that could come of so many Jenga pieces being pulled out of the dang tower. And that's what this is. Shutting down entire organizations. Right now, putting a halt on National Labor Relations Board actions. You heard the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau gutting. And this is only the beginning. Surely, ripping away this many guardrails and shutting down this many institutions is bound to have a catastrophic consequence. What that is specifically, you heard, it could be mishandling a new pandemic or not stopping it before it started. It could be economic, something like 2008 because of the CFPB attacks. It could be so many different things. I'll keep you updated on all of it, but we should at least think about it. Patriot Takes, just for a little bit of comedic relief amid this, did post a photo of a bunch of motorcyclists who are Trump supporters. And they wear these, I've shown you this before, they wear these leather jackets that say "Born to Ride" at the top, and at the bottom, Donald J. Trump. And in small, eensy-weensy text, it says "for," meaning the full phrase should be "Born to Ride for Donald J. Trump." Because they go on motorcycles. Go, 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 go. That's awesome, right? We're born to ride for Trump. Trump. The issue is when you make big text say something and one's eyes doesn't perceive the little text, all we read is that your shirt says "Born to Ride Trump." You do you, though, I guess. So back to quickly what Trump said about Medicaid and how it's not going to be your benefits that are targeted to fund this reconciliation package and these massive tax extensions and tax cut breaks for the rich. Well, Stephen Ratner outlines that that's very much not the case. The House GOP plan Trump endorsed is poised to slash Medicaid by around 10% and SNAP, being food stamps, by around 20%. And increase deficits by $2.8 trillion to pay for the tax cut renewals. And you can see there, they're cutting taxes, they're adding to the deficits, massive amounts. But then in the name of cutting the deficit, they're demanding reductions in spending to the very programs that everyday Americans benefit from. What Trump promises you saw in the clip earlier was not going to happen. Another means by which you could cause a social crisis, leaving people hanging who absolutely need, we're talking about food or medical care, Medicaid. And he's just lying because he's endorsed a plan that necessarily requires cuts to these programs. We'll see if it gets through, but Republicans do have the majority in the House and Senate. And so it seems likely. But the big reason they say that's acceptable, which is cutting the dang deficit and not exacerbating the debt problem, is not even happening. Because the tax cut plan is so gargantuous that it's still going to worsen the problem, even while in the name of fiscal responsibility going after people's benefits. One of the more absurd things you could possibly do in politics. Share your thoughts in the comments.